are consistently the leading cause of injury-producing accidents. They account for more than 1 million injuries each year in the United States. What is the cause of so many of these falls? In a great majority of cases, dangerous and hazardous conditions. Dangerous conditions such as torn carpeting, changes in flooring, poor lighting, narrow stairs, or a wet floor can cause someone to slip and hurt themselves inside a building. Other instances of slip and fall accidents can occur when people trip on broken or cracked public sidewalks or trip and fall on stairs or escalators. In addition, a slip and fall case might arise when someone slips or trips and falls because of rain, ice, snow, or a hidden hazard, such as a pothole in the ground. There is no precise way to determine when someone else is legally responsible for your injuries if you slip or trip or fall. Each case turns on whether the property owner acted carefully so that slipping or tripping was not likely to happen, and whether you were careless in not seeing or avoiding the condition that caused the accident. In this insider exclusive investigative special, we go behind the headlines in Slip and Fall Accidents, Marvin Schmidt's story, to examine how Buddy Yosha, founder of Yosha, Cook, Shartzer, and Tisch, successfully represented Marvin Schmidt and his family in one of those slip and fall accidents that could have happened to any one of us. Marvin slipped and fell and broke his hip at the Indianapolis airport at a car rental facility where the janitorial company had just washed and waxed the floor and had no warning signs out to warn anyone of the potential danger. Buddy Yosha successfully represented Marvin and will share some of the general rules of thumb to help you decide if you've been injured in a fall, whether someone else could be held responsible for your injuries. To prove the cause of an accident due to a dangerous condition really hinges on that fact, that the owner or the possessor of the property knew of the dangerous condition. In order to establish that a property owner or possessor knew of a dangerous condition, it must be shown that the owner or possessor created the condition, the owner or the possessor knew the condition existed and negligently failed to correct it, or the condition existed for such a length of time that the owner or possessor should have discovered and corrected it prior to the slip and fall incident in question. Throughout his career, Buddy Yosha has earned a reputation as an unyielding advocate and lawyer who repeatedly represents individual men, women, and families against large corporations, and repeatedly wins. Buddy has earned the highest respect from citizens and lawyers alike as one of the best trial lawyers in Indianapolis, in Indiana, and across the nation. He's a past president of the Indiana Association of Trial Attorneys and has built a substantial reputation nationwide by consistently winning cases other law firms have turned down. Buddy's spirit and dedication is often compared to President Teddy Roosevelt's, especially when it comes to being in the courtroom, in the arena he knows so well. For as he likes to say, it is not the critic who counts, nor the man who points out how the strong man stumbled or the doer of deeds could have done it better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, and spends himself in a worthy cause, daring greatly so that his place shall never be amongst those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. Buddy's amazing courtroom skills and headline-grabbing success rate continue to provide his clients with the results they need and the results they deserve. Hi, I'm Steve Murphy, and this is the Insider Exclusive, live from Indianapolis, Indiana, at the law firm of Yosha, Cook, Shartzer, and Tisch. It is my great pleasure to introduce Buddy Yoshi to the show. Welcome to the show, Buddy.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Whenever we have a show like this, we always like to have our audience learn a little bit about the lawyers that we're featuring today. So tell us a little bit about your firm. What do you guys do?
We do strictly personal injury litigation, and I've done that for almost close to 50 years now.
Representing the little guy.
The little guy.
Yeah, and I want our audience to know that when you take on a case, your client doesn't pay you. If you lose the case, they don't pay you anything. So it's a gamble.
Strictly.
Yeah, and you have to look at it. So there's a great deal of satisfaction when you win a case, because not only do you win your client money that they need usually. But in addition to that, you have righted a wrong, right?
If it comes out that way, that's our goal. And the part about expenses of a trial, we also advance the expenses of a trial. Experts, depositions. You've got to be careful when you decide to take a case because all the hue and cry about frivolous litigation. Lawyers can't afford to take bad cases because 1/3 of nothing on a contingent fee is nothing. So
and you bring up a very good point about frivolous lawsuits. A lot of people think, wow, lawyers file frivolous lawsuits. Frivolous lawsuits, when they're filed, are quickly dismissed. And oftentimes the lawyer is sanctioned for bringing them at all, right?
Yeah, and they can have to pay costs. And I'm sure I'm sure that it's happened. Federal rules provide that, and state rules. That if it's obdurate or deemed frivolous in hindsight, that you could be called on to pay some of the expenses of the defense. And that makes it, it's a built-in mechanism for a lawyer to not take a frivolous case. And I go through all that on voir dire with the jury.
Now, today we're going to be talking about a case which, when I first saw it, I said, that could have affected me. A man, Marvin Schmidt, walking through an airport to get his rental car, slips and falls on the floor, which was recently waxed and washed with no kind of warning sign out there. Tell us a little bit about, before we get into the case, who is Marvin Schmidt? What kind of person is he?
Marvin was a self-made man. At the time that he fell at the airport, exchanging cars at a car rental facility, he was 54. He had always loved racing, had a racing injury maybe 20 some odd years before he fell that made him semi-paralysis on the right side. He was in the business of building and owning salvage yards, car wrecks and auto parts stores, and he built a nice business, ends up selling it, and goes to work at the time of the fall for the people that he sold the company to, and he loved that kind of work. And his family has always been into racing. It was a racing injury that hurt him in '74, and they loved racing. And he was in Indianapolis in January '97 at the airport to exchange a car, and they were going to Chicago, him and a colleague, to buy some parts for a race car. And he goes in, it's in January of '97, at a national car rental agency that had a franchise. And he goes into the franchise and he wanted to exchange a car. He walks in, the weather was a little inclement, but not terrible. And there was a cleaning service, an independent service that the rental company had hired to do their cleaning. During working hours when visitors were there conducting business, and that was a big issue. He comes in and he goes up to the counter and to exchange cars, and behind him the janitorial service lady's got her mop and a sign on it that says dangerous when wet, but there was no signs when he walked in. There was 2 entrances. But the entrance he came in didn't have any kind of warning that they were doing any cleaning up. The janitorial service lady had instructions to immediately clean if anybody brings in moisture. She thought that Marv brought in moisture, walks behind him at the counter, and on the tile floor, she waxes and washes it, turns around, she leaves it to air dry. Well, he's only there a minute. Facing Marvin and the girl that cleaned up was the rental agent. He didn't say a word that somebody's cleaning behind you. And so he turns around and it's still wet, takes 1 step on the tile floor, boom, he breaks his right hip.
Tell us what injuries he incurred.
Well, Marv the next morning had a hip reduction for the fractured hip on the right side. his wife came in from Los Angeles, where they lived at the time, and had the ordeal of taking him back after about 3 days in the hospital, which was an ordeal to get back home. He gets home and he starts to try to work from his bed after the surgery for his company. They'd send him work on video camera at night, and he would work from home. Well, after 3-4 months, he's getting a delayed union of the bone coming together. Comes back to Indianapolis, sees the doctor again. They do a bone scan, and he's got a non-union, which means a bilateral hip replacement.
So basically, he's not going to be able to work anymore, right?
No, he was done. After that, the doctors from LA and locally says, you can't work anymore. It's too hard on him.
Yeah. Now, when you took the case, what was your strategy to win this case? What were some of the issues involved? What did you have to prove? What did the defense claim?
The difficulty is the defense always claims in a slip and fall that the victim or the plaintiff didn't watch where they were going.
Yeah.
And in this case, indeed, that was their defense. But this one, slip and fall cases are very difficult because what puts the defendant, property owner, on notice for a defect in the floor is if it's quite obvious, then the victim should see it also. Here, he had no chance. It was right behind him.
Right.
And the strategy as it unfolded, it was one step, first step. So we didn't have a lot of problems with liability.
Yeah, they also made the claim, though, that the mop bucket in and of itself was a warning sign.
Well,
right?
That's true. They did say that, but unfortunately, as the evidence unfolded, the bucket had left with the lady that had cleaned behind him, and he never saw it.
Yeah, now you got a huge verdict on this. Tell our audience what the verdict was.
Well, the verdict was $7.5 million, and they allocated 23%, I believe, to the janitorial service. They were independent, but under the control of the car rental agency, and they gave 2.8 loss of services to Mrs. Schmidt, to having to take care of Marvin, and it's a big burden to have to do all the duties that she had to undertake to take care of him, and that's $2.8 million for a man that was 54 years old that's got 25-30 years left. Significant.
Today we're lucky enough to have one of the jurors with us today, Rick Sutton, so we're going to bring him on right now. It is my great pleasure to introduce Rick Sutton to the show. Welcome to the show, Rick.
Thank you.
I understand that you were one of 2 forepersons on this jury. It was kind of unusual, wasn't it, Buddy?
Very unusual.
But why was there 2 instead of 1?
I don't recall how it happened. It's just when you get behind closed doors, you just start picking up roles, and that's the way it came out.
Did you volunteer to be a foreperson?
I don't think so.
You don't. You were selected by others, or
Yes,
what?
yes,
Were there people that said, I don't want to be?
yes.
Now, as America watches this show, everybody wants to know what went on behind closed doors. And did you take an initial vote?
As I recall, we did take a vote right away. And
how did that vote look at that time?
the vote was favorable to Mr. Schmidt right out of the chute.
Yeah.
But the judge's instructions were then to assign blame between 2 entities, and that took a little more time.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about, were there some real holdouts who just wouldn't budge one bit? What did you do with these jurors?
In any situation like that, you have to listen to their arguments. We did. There was one juror in particular who didn't want to assign as much liability. So the rest of us persuaded with our notes. All the jurors took very good notes.
Yeah.
And it was clear from the outset that the car rental company had been negligent, so it was just a matter of convincing one person to come around to our view.
This was a huge verdict, wasn't it, Buddy?
For the time, yes, it was. Both a slip and fall verdict and significant loss of services verdict for the wife.
Yeah. How did you arrive at, it was what, 2 million?
2.8 for the spouse's loss of services and 4.6 for Marv, the injured plaintiff.
How did you come up with that number?
At the time, there were identifiable medical expenses.
Yeah.
We sat there and looked at the gentleman and saw how old he was and tried to put ourselves in his shoes in 10, 15, 20 years,
Yeah.
and his wife's shoes in like periods of time, and to determine how much it would cost to keep him cared for and for them to enjoy the lifestyle they had before the accident. It was simple math.
Yeah. Were there any people that thought the amount of money was excessive?
No.
None. Did anybody want to give more than that?
As I recall, we asked the judge for instructions a couple of times about maximums, and she sent back word that she could only read her initial instructions, so we were kind of on our own.
Yeah. When you say you try to put yourself in the shoes of Mr. Schmidt, he was a likable individual,
Yeah.
was he?
Yes,
That was a
very.
very persuasive
Very.
factor in it, right?
Right.
What did you like about him?
A self-made man. He worked hard. He'd worked hard his whole life. He'd overcome an earlier injury and continued to work very, very hard, build a great company,
Yeah.
do a good job, and he was hurt doing something that he really wanted to do. So it tugged on all our heartstrings.
So in other words, this was a guy that wasn't looking to make a jackpot with the jury system, right?
No, not at all.
He was a guy that unfortunately couldn't do what he loved to do best anymore.
That's absolutely right.
What do you think about the American jury system? Do you think that's a good way to go?
It worked in this case. I had never been on a jury before or since, so the mechanics were mystifying, but once you get into it, it's just common sense.
If you had a message to send to America today in terms of the CEOs and how corporations should be more responsible, what would you say to them?
Apply common sense. There was no common sense applied here. Hoosiers have a high degree of common sense. We saw what should have happened there, and it did not.
Right. It was just people looking to get out of paying any money, right?
Correct.
I want to thank you very much for being on the program. One last thing. Buddy here did a fabulous job presenting the case. What do you think of his law firm?
I'm impressed. I knew his co-counsel at the time, and I know his co-counsel rather. Good lawyers, good firm. The other side was represented well too. This was good lawyering all the way around.
Well, it's very complimentary that you're very neutral and you're saying this because, you know, basically everybody was trying to apply good common sense to a guy that really deserved it, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. I want to thank you very much for being on the program and taking your time to be here today.
Thank you.
These kinds of accidents could happen to any one of us.
Absolutely.
When they happen to us, why is it important to get a lawyer to represent you, and more importantly, an experienced lawyer?
Well, I was experienced at the time we took the case, and I had spent already 1 year of my life in front of juries. They never made the first offer to us until mediation. So if someone makes a claim direct without a lawyer, thinking that they're going to pay without a lawyer doesn't happen. If it does, there's something wrong. They just say it's your fault. You just should have watched where you were going, and that's the end of that.
And the reason for that is because they know they can drag it out. A lot of people don't like suing, do they?
Until it happens to them, I don't know. No, if that happens to them, I don't find a lot of resistance. They come in and say, I don't believe in suing. I get victims that call us say, I don't believe, but this was so serious, I have to do it. Well, when it happens to them, they pretty much want to assert their rights.
Is it any indication to you about the worthiness of a case, the value of a case, if an insurance company is willing to settle right off the bat?
Yes, but for what price?
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of them are anxious, and there's been a trend in the last 20 years. Cases that used to take plaintiffs' lawyers a year to 2 to resolve now take 3 and 4.
Right.
And they stretch them out. They just don't want to pay till the 11th hour.
Yeah,
and
and
I'm sorry, I'm not an 11th hour settler.
Yeah.
It's too hard to put those cases together and then settle at the steps of the courthouse.
Well, that brings up another question, because what they want to do is put the pressure on your client, because mounting medical bills are arriving at their doorstep every day.
Well,
so my question to you is, how does your law firm help deal with those medical bills that are mounting and mounting while the insurance company is putting the squeeze on?
that happens all the time. It wasn't an issue for our case because Marvin not only could pay his own medical with his insurance,
Yeah.
of which we have to pay back out of a settlement or verdict, what's called subrogation. But he could also afford to turn down an offer and
Yeah.
go to court. It's a lot of pressure on most victims. Can't afford to turn down, no matter what the value. If it's a $10,000 case and you get close to there,
Right.
people want to just get it over with. And the big figures, it's a lot of risk. I mean, you take a victim, that victim only has one case. The insurance industry, a big insurance company, has thousands all over the world and to defend, and they can afford to go to court better than we can for our clients. So it's something we have to always watch out.
So do you help them negotiate with their medical bills?
Yes.
You do.
What happens is, if, let's say that we have a client that has no insurance,
Yeah.
we write, I just had a case like that last summer, and we had to write, he had $400,000 in medical, that he had some kind of ERISA policy that we didn't want to deal with.
Yeah.
And instead, we wrote protection letters to each and every medical provider and told them we will pay them out of the settlement 100 cents on the dollar, and if they want interest, feel free to charge us interest.
That's a
right?
protection letter.
Letter of protection, and that's what we did in that case. And if ERISA would have paid the bills, they per contract get out for a lot less,
Yeah.
and it worked out better this way because the reasonable value of the medical services was $400,000.
Well, that was a great victory, great verdict. I want to thank you very much for being on the program, and we certainly hope you have other cases like that.
Thank you so much. We enjoyed it. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.